Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Government's Approach to Digital Innovation During COVID, sponsored by ServiceNow on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Pablo Stern, the Senior Vice President for IT Workflow Products at ServiceNow, Yemi Oshinaye, the Deputy CIO for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Kashif Pandya, the Deputy CIO for IT Operations at the IRS. Last segment, we talked a lot about the cloud moving toward the as-a-service model. Now, as agencies and organizations really generally move toward that as-a-service model, that means there's going to be a lot of, if you will, back and forth to that cloud, back and forth to the hybrid environment, the on-prem, looking for data, pulling data, sharing data. Is that causing a complexity that agencies and other organizations really need to start understanding because of the, if you will, amount of requests, amount of data that's coming back and forth? Pablo, lead us off with that question.
Yeah, and this is absolutely what we're seeing, and actually that complexity is driving a huge opportunity, because what we've seen across our customers is historically requests were mainly coming in from people. People were picking up the phone, they were calling to support, they needed a laptop, they needed to get their password reset. And what we've seen is as more and more of these services are going out into cloud and there are more sensors in the cloud, you're actually starting to see more data coming in from the cloud. And the transition is that now actually we're at a transition point where most of the data that's actually coming into the organization is actually coming in from the cloud, from these sensors. And what that really means is now you have the ability to use that information to be able to, by applying machine learning, by applying chatbots or AI ops, to really drive insights from that information that's going to help you identify some of those issues before somebody starts picking up the phone, before somebody calls you in. And really, we see that as a convergence between this service management world and the operations world into like a converged service operations. And if you can see that across your entire landscape together, it actually enables you to deliver better outcomes, to drive automation, to really get to the issues before anybody picks up the phone and starts calling support.
Yeah, I like the way you phrased that. I think one of, through our journey, we saw a couple of things. Is the more we became digital, you have this initial sprawl where you're saying, oh my goodness, I didn't know I had these many requests. Because it's easier for folks to make a request when it's digital and it's automated and it's a click of a finger that you can make a request. But then you realize, well, guess what I have now? The gift is I have data. I have tons of data about, what the request is, how the request came in, where the request came in from, and what are the particulars of it. So to your point, Pablo, now I can get ahead of it because I know every November in the West Coast, I'm getting an order for 1,000, hotspots because they're going to the beach to work, right? And because everyone else is snowed in, right? So now I know that data point and I can actually effectively plan for it. And oh, by the way, cut my costs because now I can bulk order to certain things. Then you go all the way to the flip side and the immigration side. We have call centers, and after every call now, we do some sentiment analysis, we do some questionnaires, find out why people are calling in. And oh, by the way, if they're calling in for one thing every single time that we can solve before they call in, then we can save the phone time. And our contact centers don't have our folks on the phone. And maybe you can go to our IVA and get your question answered through a chat bot or through questions on the website. And it's all about efficiency, but it starts with getting that data, looking at data, and responding to the data. So I think it really revolutionizes the way we do things.
Yeah, I'll jump in here as well, Jason. So for us, this is really an introduction or an obvious need or identification for AI ops, artificial intelligence operations. And I refer to it, when I speak with the teams, there are the 3 V's when we talk about AI ops. There's the velocity, the volume, and variety, and all of it pertains to data. So it has to start with the underlying understanding of our data and having a data strategy, because that's where a lot of the AI and machine learning and deep learning, that's where it's building off of, right? It's the consumption of this voluminous data that is generated by all these various sensors and systems. How best can you make sense of it so that you can leverage it to now identify efficiencies and effectiveness in the operations world or system, service management world? So I would say for us, it starts with identifying data, identifying how best to collect the data, how best to make sense of it, and then marrying that up against the use cases that we are collecting. Whether it's password resets, or whether it's, why a specific incident continues to occur on repeated fashion. We can start identifying the use cases, but we really need to build out the data strategy before we can get there. From an IRS perspective, we have something, the last I spoke with our team, something upwards of 20 to 30 petabytes of data. Trying to sort through that and make meaningful use of it requires a strategy first before we can just assume that we'll know exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, and if I was to just, and I'll build on this a little bit, because I think something that Yemi said really rings true for me as well, which is like that ability to drive both the information that's coming in from people with the data sets that you have, and to Kashid's point, bringing that together in a data lake, then gives you that ability to really drive the machine learning that's going to be able to find those needles in a haystack that you can go then and take action around. And if you think about AI ops, it's really that convergence of data with machine learning to drive insights. But the thing that's super important there is you can't stop at the insight. You actually need the automation and that workflow to go and get to the outcome. So it really, you have to take that knowledge and apply it to something to be able to get to the outcomes that you want.
You're absolutely right. It isn't identification, and now that we know, great, we know. It's what are we going to do with it? And coming back to the points around automation, and that's where I see a lot of the AI ops leading towards. Identify, collect, and then build automation around what are those use cases that you identified that are in the most pressing need of some action being taken against them, knowing that we don't have the resources to keep up with what is being put out there.
Kashid, I imagine at the end of every April, May timeframe, the IRS looks back at, okay, what happened during this tax season, then how can we improve upon it? Have you seen kind of that process change over the last few years as you guys have modernized, as you've digitally transformed, and then added some of these tools to your tool belt?
Absolutely, absolutely. We are using much more, I'd say, predictive analysis and predictive behavior to try and be more effective as we lead into filing season, certainly as we execute filing season. And that's coming back to the points around data. Where we were to, as we prepared for filing season, we are always looking for what were those problem issues or problem childs last year. And then what have been the issues as we lead into it before filing season starts, using data and using, again, an opportunity to find automation or areas of concerns. We are now able to be better, able to predict what is likely to occur. Everything from, a lot of our incidents were previously caused by the need for us to complete health checks in time. So now we know we're going to do health checks much more advanced or early in the year. We also saw X number of incidents occur for application Y, so we're going to take proactive actions to now shore up, patch, whatever it is, assign the right level of resources to that application. We have continued to rely on and leverage the collection of data that we produce to now become better in predicting what is likely to go wrong, and therefore putting us in more of a proactive fashion or proactive position rather than reactive.
And so much of this comes back to be able to better serve your customers, better serve the citizens. And I think it was mentioned earlier on in our discussion how the move to the cloud, the urgency, the acceleration of digital transformation really in the end is making USCIS or IRS or whomever more responsive to the citizenship. Is that really the end goal that we're talking about here? I mean, it's great, as Kashid said, the cloud's great, but it's another tool. Are you starting to see that the pandemic and this move to the cloud and digital transformation has changed the way you're able to serve your customers, the public or the citizens or businesses?
Absolutely. I saw Yemi come off mute also, so I don't want to be the one who hogs the airways, but I'll go since I'm already talking. Absolutely. Our ultimate goal and focus is improving taxpayer experience. Taxpayer First Act came out in July of 2019, and it is all about improving taxpayer experience. So that remains at the forefront of anything and everything we do. What the pandemic highlighted for us is we are not able to and haven't been able to serve our taxpayers who still rely on paper as well as we can and should. So that has really put that priority on at the front for us as well. We cannot force taxpayers to go digital, but what we can do is provide a digital experience for them when we get the information that we need from them. So for us, it certainly has become a key focus area. We've established a digitalization office. We have a director leading that digitalization office, and we're heavily focused on how can we improve that digital experience for all taxpayers. Ultimately, it really is all about the constituents and the taxpayers that we are focused on day in and day out.
Yeah, and I would say it's very similar because our mission is got a lot of paper with it too, and so our focus was making sure there's an avenue to be digital end to end, from putting your application in to communication, interviews, to calling in, getting updates. So we wanted to facilitate the experience of the applicant, and so we invested in that, and I see that. Not only does cloud give you an opportunity to do that, but it's also speed to market because, we mentioned Agile early in the session, but Agile is all about that feedback and being able to respond to the feedback. So I can, set up a service, and if the service has something that's not exactly right, now we can change it and quickly turn it back around. And based on the feedback from a customer, provide them with the new experience and continue to grow and scale that way. So, it's really supported it. And in the pandemic, it's kind of forced us to look at from a service perspective to our customer, what are those things that we haven't thought of, and how much can we be, in a non-physical environment where you don't have to touch paper, you don't have to be in front of someone, and can we communicate and collaborate using the tools that are at our disposal and kind of tweak them to meet the needs of the applicant.
And I'll I'll pile on, and I'll go back to where Kashit started us in the conversation today around driving experiences. And the way we look at it is it's experiences for the technologists. That could be your app dev teams that are trying to drive those agile initiatives, or as Yemi talked about a bit earlier, the low code for the citizen developers that you have that are also now trying to move more quickly, and technologists in the organization. And then from there, your employees, how are you serving those employees? Are you driving their experiences? And with their consumerized expectations, are you able to meet them where they're coming to you in your organization? And then going all the way out to that citizen or the customer and making sure that they have what they need and how they're expecting it. And really it comes down to how are you driving the work that is enabling and empowering that through the experiences that people really are expecting in this digitally transformed world.
The last piece I just want to touch upon for our conversation today is this idea of operational resiliency. And I think this tags back to throughout the entire conversation. We saw with the pandemic, as I think Yemi mentioned, it made some investments to get you toward, make sure you're resilient. And we're just about a couple minutes left, but maybe each of you take 30 seconds or so and just talk about how all these efforts are really also pushing towards better citizen services, but then the operational resiliency. Yemi, you start us off and then we'll kind of work backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as we move more to, cloud services and pick the right services, that there's some natural operational resiliency there, because now you can actually scale because those services are right there for you. You don't have to worry about, your environment because the expert is taking care of that for you. All you need to know is that these services are available, and when something happens, there's easy failover. A lot of that comes with architecture, but it's right there for you. Also, you're able to build in services and function for the user that now they have options, and options that are able to get to them quickly. Again, I mentioned speed to market. If we find there's a problem that doesn't allow our operator to fulfill their mission, we can easily spin something up in a SaaS environment. We can easily, we talked about with some other components, share code across so that we're able to respond fast. And it's really one about the resiliency, but two about the response. And you see things are just so much quicker with these services that are there for you.
Kashit, give me about one sentence about operational resiliency, and Pablo, I'll get you one sentence too, because then we gotta end our discussion, unfortunately.
For us, it should be no different than a commodity service that you currently are used to in your personal life. Turn on a light switch, you expect electricity to be there. We want IRS to be the same. No matter what, we're always up and available.
I'll give you my 1 sentence. So you're trying to innovate more quickly, as Kashit said, but in order to do that, you also have to make sure that operational resilience is there. This is how dev and ops are coming together into one world. And I think that is the destination that everybody has.
Those are great one sentence. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So let me thank my guests for today. Pablo Stern, the Senior Vice President for IT Workflow Products at ServiceNow. Yemi Oshinaye, the Deputy CIO for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Kashit Pandya, the Deputy CIO for IT Operations at the IRS. Pablo, Yemi, Kashit, thank you so much for your time today. I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the panel discussion, Government's Approach to Digital Transformation During COVID, sponsored by ServiceNow on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search ServiceNow.